God bless everybody. Today it is November 8th of 2025. And in the last 12 hours, yesterday on November 7th, as we're going into this very important date of November 8th, 2025 on the Jewish calendars, I'll show you why as we're moving forward. Something extremely important happened in the world scene, and that was Turkey. Erdogan issues arrest warrants for up to 37 Israeli officials. You can see some of the people that are listed, and that they are going to literally arrest them if they have the ability to find these individuals due to war crimes in Gaza. And so this is extremely important because there's an extremely important set of events that are going to affect us in the next year on the biblical calendar, and I'm going to show you on a text file how that could affect us as we move forward today. So this is an update to the last two videos actually, and if you go back and watch the last two videos, they'll run concurrently to where we are now. It's extremely important that the biblical calendars can actually track what we're seeing right now in real time, and I've been trying to explain that based on this Paradigm 2030 chart. And I have updated that chart at this time, and we will get into that as we move into the video. So what I'm trying to get across to everybody is we have an important date now, today, which is November 8th of 2025, and that it's going to affect us in the next year, or possibly how that's going to affect us in the next year. So I believe this is an extremely important video that will frame what's coming up in the next year. And the reason I say that is because of this November 8th date that we are on today, and how that's going to literally start a process that's going to last about a year based on biblical accounts. But I'm going to go back a couple years because I have to set this up and allow you to understand why we are right now in this position. So the 5 red heifers that they found that were unblemished were transferred from Texas to Israel in September of 22. This was extremely important because this set off a chain of events, and it's working up to now. Today, and actually yesterday was with Turkey condemning Israel and putting in war crimes. That really matters to what's going to happen to Israel as we move forward, and I talked about how they're going to be neutralized, and Turkey will end up down in Gaza against Egypt, but we'll see how this plays out. So on March 10th we had this special Shabbat Para, probably saying it wrong, in 23. This is extremely important because this is the day that they would possibly do the red heifer sacrifice. Now I originally thought, based on the Temple Temple Institute information, they originally had stated, I thought it was to Nisan. They're not stating that at this time. They're actually not stating any date. So if we're looking at the Jewish calendars and trying to figure out a date that they would have the red heifer sacrifice prior to Passover, what date would they use? So I think, since it did not happen this year and they were just practicing, that they will do this in 2026 because they have to cleanse the remnant prior to them being hidden. And so he will actually allow them to do the red heifer sacrifice before allowing the exodus of the 1/3 of the Jews to the hidden place for the 1260 days. This is extremely important because we then can sort of isolate down next year when this date of the red heifer sacrifice would occur. If it is on this very specific date, which is the Sabbath of the red heifer, then that would be actually on March 7th. And so actually that matters on the Paradigm 2030 chart, and I'll show you as we move forward on the chart as we get into that. So on I thought it was April 5th, it's actually April 3rd, we saw this extremely important event right before Passover, and so all this is culminating into an attack of Hamas on Israel on October 7th, 2023. So this rabbi comes out on April 3rd of 2023, 12 Nisan, and basically stops them bringing any animals to the Temple Mount, to the Al-Aqsa compound, and says he can't do any live sacrifices, things like that. This happens 2 days prior to Passover, and they were having all this disruption because the Muslim holidays were going on at the same time, and so they barred all these people. And then 6 months later, approximately 6 months later, on October 7th, 2023, we saw Hamas attack Israel. This is extremely important because the Hamas and Palestinians groups were talking about it, the Battle of the Al-Aqsa Flood, or the Al-Aqsa Mosque. If you go into the temple, so they're bringing you back to the red heifers. They were trying to actually kill the red heifers, I believe, in that process, so they could not do the red heifer sacrifice the next year, or whenever they were going to do that, they wouldn't have the ability because it's hard to find unblemished heifers. And so 6 months later, they had the attack of October 7th, and we saw all that carnage happen. Okay, so this rabbi comes out on April 3rd, stops the sacrifices on the Temple Mount. We start to see Passover come in, and then I talked about in the last 2 videos how Shemini Atzeret were going to affect us in the last 3 years, and that's going to lead us into today, which will lead us into what's coming up in the next year. So in 2023, on Shemini Atzeret, that was the date of the Hamas attack on Israel. Okay, so that was an extremely important date. A year later, Iran and Hezbollah had attacked Israel on October 1st of 2024. We saw all those drones and everything hit them, and then nothing happened. Israel didn't respond. The reason they didn't respond, and I had done a video about this, was, look, they were in their high holy days coming out of October 1st into October 2nd. So you got Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Feast of Tabernacles here. Then it ends in Shemini Atzeret on October 25th, and then right after that, on basically Shemini Atzeret, we saw Israel launch that massive attack on Iran. We had just attacked them through Midnight Hammer ourselves, and so all these different things were breaking down and literally falling apart over there. And so for 2 years in a row on Shemini Atzeret, we had an extremely important event happen over in the Middle East that is affecting Israel. So I wondered, were we going to have something happen on October 14, 2025? And we did. This is the moment that Turkey put its footprint into Gaza, and this was the game changer, which is leading to where we are right at this very moment in time. So there was a set of events that happened between October 13th and 14th, which led us to where we are right now on November 8th. Okay, so on Shemini Atzeret on October 13th and 14th, it's actually the 14th, we started to see that Hamas release the day before. Okay, so you had on October 13th, Hamas released the 20 living hostages in exchange for nearly 2,000 prisoners and detainees held by Israel, marked by a major milestone in the U.S. brokered ceasefire agreement. The exchange is part of the first phase of the peace deal to end the conflict in Gaza. And so, but everything started to break down on this date of Shemini Atzeret because they did not get back but 4 of the deceased hostages, and there were 28 of them. They actually still have not got, I believe, 7 of them back at this point today, November 8th. So you can see how this is going terribly. And Trump had given them a 72-hour window. So this started to break down, and then what happened? Turkey has an article about him putting boots on the ground. So the original reports actually started coming out on October 20th about how Erdogan had slipped under the radar and gained a foothold in Gaza, because we have to go back and look at what happened. Trump, Netanyahu, and Erdogan all went to the UN, did their speeches. They were all very condescending to each other. Trump then flies to Egypt, invites Netanyahu to go there for the peace, ceasefire thing of 2025, the big peace agreement in the Middle East. And Erdogan snubs Netanyahu and says, no, you're not going to go there. So the only group that wasn't there at the ceasefire thing in Egypt was Israel, which is amazing because they were one of the 2 players. In the same breath, Netanyahu then can't be part of that, and in the same breath, Erdogan puts his foothold in Gaza by actually putting equipment down on the ground in Gaza itself. So now you have actually Turkey contractors in Israel. They're not military yet, but I believe that's getting ready to happen. So based on that article, I wanted to go back and track when did they actually put their footprint in, and actually you can go and look at that they put their footprint in on Shemini Atzeret, which is basically October 14th, and you can see that they started bringing up aid trucks in to Gaza from Egypt, and that this, and I'm not going to read all these, you guys can read them as you go down here. They started doing all these humanitarian things to try to get their footprint in there. They haven't got a military in there, but they are literally brought bulldozers with Turkish flags on. So now they have Turkish assets on the ground. They probably are building a airstrip down there. And so you can see that they've been not only getting involved in the Gaza humanitarian thing and trying to keep Israel out to re-entrench Hamas, and I've even thought that possibly because Erdogan had a meeting with Hamas, they sort of built this narrative that we'll agree with all this stuff that Israel and America is saying, and then we're going to renege on it. We're going to string out these dead hostages, and we're going to re-entrench you into the system, and then I'll get down in there, and then they won't be able to do anything. And I've talked about how, if you go back in history, Nebuchadnezzar basically neutralizes Israel so that they cannot attack down in Gaza. And that's basically what's happened at this very moment in time. Israel's not really attacking down in Gaza that much at this moment in time because they're still trying to get all the hostages back. And they've upgraded all their attacks in the north against Hezbollah, and that is totally collapsing because the Lebanese government is not going to deal with the Hezbollah problem, and so Israel thinks they have to. That's going to cause problems with Turkey as we move forward. So I was just tracking this, to make sure, that this is what is happening. You can easily follow all these events as you go through here, and I'm not going to read off all of these, but I just wanted to make the point that yes, on Shemini Atzeret, October 14, 2025, we saw Turkey put their footprint in Gaza. So now we have Erdogan with a footprint in Gaza, and not only does he have the footprint in Gaza, he's condemning the hierarchy of Israel on top of that, stating that he will arrest any of these Israeli officials if he gets the ability, or any country that doesn't agree with Israel can arrest them. And he's trying to get this passed through the UN, not only to bring his peacekeepers in, but to eliminate the threat of Israel in Gaza through the UN, through international condemnation, which basically is working really well because Israel is not able to do anything at this moment in time. They literally had to pretty much shut down that war, and they're collapsed back to that yellow zone. So I'm coming back to the text file now, because now we're going to see what's going to lead us in from today, that important date on the Jewish calendar. I'm getting ready to show you. This is extremely important, and it's biblical, and it's reflecting an event sequence of the past that looks to me like we're going to reoccur as we move forward in the next year. So as you get into this next portion, which is what this video is basically about, I was just setting it up to this point. I'm sorry it took me 16 minutes to do that, but it's extremely important that you understand the context that you're walking into. On this very day, today, is when Noah's doors were shut on the ark, and we started to see the 40 days of rain and flooding that basically cleansed the planet of all the wickedness. And so if you look at the story of Noah and the flood, there's a very specific chain of events that occur over approximately a year, and I want to go over those events because as you are in today, November 8th of 2025, 17th Heshvan. Some of them take the C off and just use the this portion of the word. So it can be used either way. I believe I've seen it on both ways on multiple different calendars and things. This is extremely important. So now, a week prior to this, on Heshvan 10, I believe, is when they started to load the actual ark. And then on 17 Heshvan, they shut the doors. And then we start that flood process. So let's look at this. I'm going to read this so I don't get off track in my thought process here. So the biblical narrative of Noah's flood provides a detailed chronology of events which can be mapped onto a Hebrew calendar. The total time spent in the ark was 1 solar year and 11 days, or 365 days according to the traditional Hebrew view, from the 17th of Heshvan in Noah's 600th year to the 27th of Heshvan the following year, which would be in 601th year. Below is a breakdown of the key events and their corresponding Hebrew calendar dates based on a traditional implementation of biblical text. This is extremely important as we're moving forward in the next year, because I believe he's letting us understand that we have a flood event in fire this time, because he wasn't going to flood us this time. This one's going to be a cleansing by fire, and so we're going to see a lot happen. If you go to the Paradigm 2030 chart, the next year is horrific, and so we will go to that, and we will look at some stuff as we go through this portion of the text file. So I'm going to provide some information and set up this next year, and I believe that as we get into the chart at the end of this file here, we're going to see some really interesting correlations. So the Bible does not explicitly name the calendar used by Noah. However, based on precise chronology provided in Genesis, scholars have deduced that the calendar system was used with a year of 360 days composed of 12 months, each with 30 days. That's different than the Jewish calendars today, and you're going to see that as we move forward. Key evidence from the Genesis flood narrative, chapters 7 and 8, point to this system. So Noah was looking at his calendar, and we have to extrapolate how that's going to affect us today. The flood began on the 17th day of the second month on his calendar. The water prevailed for 150 days. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat on the 17th day of the 7th month. The time between the start date of the second month of the 17th day, which is when the flood began, to the date the ark rested on the 7th month, 17th day, was exactly 5 months, which over a period of 150 days indicates that each month was reckoned by having a precise 30 days, or 150 days. 5 months equals 30 days per month. And so this is how we believe that Noah used his calendar, because the regular Jewish calendar, lunar calendars, don't exist at this time. Noah was using his own calendar. So they were trying to figure out how he extrapolated these dates down based on Genesis 7 and 8. The system of 360 days, or 12 times 30, is distinct from the later Hebrew calendar given to Moses during the Exodus, which was a lunisolar calendar with alternating 29 and 30-day months that required periodic adjustment or inclinatory months to stay in sync with the solar year. Some ancient calendars, such as the ancient Egyptian calendar, also used a 12-month or 30 days plus 5 extra days at the end of the year to complete the solar cycle. So how does this affect us today, and why is this important? So as I've shown you, since Shemini Atzeret, we've had this Turkish buildup. Now, on November 8th of 2025, the day before, or as we're going into this date, Turkey condemns all the Israeli hierarchy and indicates they would arrest them or do whatever they want due to war crimes in Gaza. This is an important date because this is the day that the flood begins and Noah shuts the door on the ark. A week prior, on Heshvan 10, they would have started to load the ark. Then on Heshvan 17, they shut the door, and then they start the 40 days of rain, okay? And so you're going to see this cascading set of events, I believe, in the next year that are going to affect us as we move forward into 2026. So you can see this first date in Genesis. I put the passages in the Bible. This is Genesis 7:11. So when you get to 27 Kislev, it's been raining for 40 days, okay? And so this would be the 3rd month of the 27th day. This would end up being this year on December 17th of 2025. So from this day of November 8th of 2025, it rains for 40 days and floods the whole world. And then we see the waters churn and swell for another 110 days, prevailing on the earth for a total of 150 days, as Genesis 7:12 indicates. That would literally take us to the 7-day first month of Sivan 1. Now this marks the end of the 150 days. Now this would actually be, if you're talking this year, this would be May 17, 2026. The waters calm down, they start to subside. They subside at approximately 1 cubit every 4 days. That's approximately 17 to 21 inches. In the history of time, it varied, so you have to look at that. When you go down and look at this next one, we see that the ark comes to rest on the mountains of Arafat, and because the waters have started to subside, and so he's on the mountains. The waters are still moving down. This happens on the 7th month, 17th day, on the 17th of Sivan. This year would be June 2nd of 2026. So see, this would take us, and you had to look at the Paradigm 2030 chart also that correlates with some of these dates and see how that lines up, because there's an interesting set of correlations there also that I found. When you get into this month of judgment in 1 Av, which is the 10th month, first day, which would be July 15th of 2026, the tops of the mountains begin to become visible as the waters begin to recede. The ark had already come to rest approximately a month and a half prior to that on this very mountaintop. But then all the other mountains started to actually become visible. You can see the passages in the book that show us this. When you get into the 11th month, 10th day, or the 10th of Elul, which would be August 23rd of 26 this year, after 40 days, Noah opens the ark window and sends out a raven. You can see that in Genesis 8:6. The 11th month, 17th day, or 17th of Elul, or August 30th of 2026 would be this year. Noah sends out a dove for the first time. It returns, finding no resting place in Genesis 8, verse 8 and 9. On the 11th month, 23rd day, or the 23rd day of Elul, which would be September 5th of 26 this year, Noah sends out a dove a second time and returns with an olive leaf. The ground's not completely dried up yet, but he's starting to see vegetation forming on the mountaintops, and the dove has found that and brought it back. So it's indicating that we've had vegetation sprouting. You can see that in Genesis 8, 10, and 11. So now we're moving into the 601st year of Noah's life, and these two events occur during that to finish out this year durational event. So when you go to the first month, first day of Tishrei 1, which is September 12th of 2026, if you go to this year, Noah sends out a dove for the third time. It does not return. The water is completely drained, and Noah removes the covering of the ark, as you can see in Genesis 8, verse 12 and 13. And then, as it indicated up above, it completes on Heshvan 27 on the second day, 27th date, which would be November 7th of 2026. The ground is fully dried, and God commands Noah and his family, along with all the animals, to leave the ark. And you can see that in Genesis 8:14 through 19. The entire duration from the start of the flood to the exit of the ark was one full solar year, or 365 days. So the question is, now that Turkey has gotten its foot in Gaza, and now it's neutralized Israel in Gaza in general, due to they're still holding up the ceasefire and all this with the hostages and different things like that they have not got back, and now that Turkish assets are down there, it's going to be hard for Israel to go down and basically annihilate the enemy and have Trump green light this, when you could potentially hit a UN, they're part of NATO, and they would be a UN peacekeeper at the same time, and so you've got a lot of international potential nightmare scenarios here if one indiscriminate bullet would affect Turkey. But Turkey's preempted that by saying, look, we're not going to allow you to do that in Gaza. We've got our footprint in there, and now we're going to arrest your officials if they are out in the open. So Israel has sort of stopped their campaign in the south in Gaza and pushed everything up to the north against Hezbollah, and this is a problem because Lebanon is not disarming Hezbollah. They don't have the capacity. The leader of Lebanon has sort of indicated this, and so Israel's pushing up against Lebanon, or up into Lebanon against Hezbollah, but that's not going to go over well with Turkey, since you've got those assets in Syria now. Now Hezbollah is Iranian based, and so we still have a potential that Israel might, with our help, maybe we won't directly hit them, but Israel might hit Iran again to eliminate that problem, as all this other stuff is happening, and Israel's not seeming to be too concerned about what the international community thinks in how they're trying to eliminate their threats, because they know that they're threats that need to go away, and if they don't remove these threats, they're just going to come back some other day. So the question is, are we going to see this Noah effect by fire this time? And how is that going to affect us as we move forward in the next year? I do believe that it's interesting timing that Erdogan would condemn these Israeli leaders on the very first day of the start of Noah's flood, leading into Heshvan 17, moving all the way through the next year to Heshvan 27, taking us into a judgment not by water, but by fire. He said he would not flood us again. Well, some parts are being flooded, but in general, this would be a cleansing by fire, that he would refine us and bring us to jealousy, to bring us back to him, to proclaim that the Lord Jesus is the Son of God, and that God himself is the creator of all things, and that we need to understand these things, and then we probably ought to come back to Torah and law, at least to the 10 Commandments in this day and age, to purify ourselves to our Creator as much as possible. So I just wanted to bring these connections to your attention. I think it's extremely important information, and how the next year could be a terrible period of time as we're moving into an Antichrist phase. And like I say, I have updated that Paradigm 2030 chart. I'm not going to go into the changes on this video, but you can see the Paradigm 2030 chart at endofdayssurvival.com. Those events in the year coming up between today and Heshvan 27 of next year can be overlaid into the chart, this Paradigm 2030 chart. And so when you click on that button, it will bring up that chart. You can see that it was updated on November 8th of 2025. This brings up this chart that I've been working on for almost a decade at this point. The last 3 years are real-time events, which would actually start around the beginning of the Shemitah cycle, okay, of September 26th of 2022, and run through the next 7 years, which would end on September 9th of 2029. Right now, you're approximately in this portion of the chart, so we'll see how that plays out. I've added additional pieces of detailed information just to make things easier to understand, like when the 1290s, 1335, 2300 days occur. I've adjusted the chart just a little bit, but it won't affect the 7-year cycle. It doesn't affect the Shemitah. It doesn't affect the paradigm stamps. It really doesn't affect real-time events or anything. I'm just tweaking the chart to make sure that I'm as accurate as possible. I will probably do a video on these changes so that I can break it away from this video, and this video is not so long. So I just wanted to bring this information to your attention. I do believe that now that Turkey's in Gaza and now he's issuing these arrest warrants, he's in the process of neutralizing Israel. And you possibly could see, as we saw in the history of time, Jehoiakim, or one of the leaders of Israel, in some capacity taken hostage or kidnapped or arrested as he's moving in through international airways and different things like that into other countries. So these guys may be isolated just to staying in their own country, or Hamas or one of these groups still could pop out of a tunnel and capture one of these leaders. So we got a lot going on here. This is a major turning point, because now you have to realize that Turkey is not going with the Trump plan. This is going to cause Trump all kinds of issues, because you're supposed to have peace in the area. And see, the groups like Turkey and the Arabs and things like that really don't like Israel, and they don't want the United States over there, and they want this controlled by Muslim groups and things like that. So we're going to see Israel, as we have, and I've been saying this for some time, something would occur that would neutralize Israel to where they cannot be an effective force in Gaza. This would allow Turkey to leap over them, get into Gaza, and this then actually will turn into a battle against Egypt as we move forward. So get your oil in your lamp, get ready. This one is going to get ugly. The door is shutting on the ark today, and the flood is getting ready to hit us for 40 days. And we will see the flooded waters for 150 days, and then it will take a year to dry this up, and by that time you already have Antichrist on the ground, and he's going to have flatteries throwing at you to say, hey, come join me, because I'm the real one. And if you don't know that the first one is Antichrist, then you need to go back and restudy your book. And you also need to realize there's no pre-rapture. You are going to be here. You're going to be here for another 4 years. And if you're in this Shemitah cycle, if it goes to the next Shemitah, that's another thing. But this is moving so quickly. I'm going to, I've been looking at this Paradigm 2030 chart for a long time, and it's been pretty much playing out consistently for the last 3 years. So I'm going to keep working with it until it falls apart. Now, that period of time would happen around March of 26 if we don't see an Antichrist come in. So I'm not trying to tell you to go sell any of your stuff or do any of that. My timeline's pretty simple. You're going to hopefully prep properly and see if an Antichrist comes in around the end of or middle of March of 26, which would then put you into 3.5 years of Antichrist into a rapture event on the Feast of Trumpets of 29. But that's 4 years from now. I'm not telling you you're going to be raptured today, tomorrow, or anytime soon. I'm just telling you it's going to be really bad, and you ought to get ready for what's getting ready to happen. Put food, water in your home, warm clothes. Make sure you have as much medicine as possible. Make sure that you have a way to purify your water. Make sure you have a way to cook. Keep warm. A lot of things need to happen to make sure that you can wade through this. And we're not here to fight an Islamic war against the other side. That's not what this is about. Jesus was not a violent. Now, he's going to come back as a conquering king and eliminate the wicked, because look at the world now. He's got to do something to cleanse it. But when he came here the first time, he wasn't a conquering king. He came here to save us. And so it's our job right now to do what? The Great Commission. That's right. We all ought to be talking about this. So if you see merit in this, please tell somebody, share the video, and I'm not here to get the likes. I'm here to give you information. I want you to understand where you are and the season and time that you're in, and that maybe we have a year-long nightmare getting ready to happen. Actually, you got a 4-year-long nightmare getting ready to happen, but the next year the floodgates are going to open up, and it's going to take a while for this destruction to hit on us. And if you look at the chart, you're going to go through what? 7 seals and 7 trumpets, okay, till the Lord comes back on the last trumpet. You got a lot going on in 4 years, but the next year is going to be a massive ramp up of destruction in the Middle East. It states what? A quarter of the Middle East melts down into war, puts what, 2 billion people into jeopardy, and the whole economy melts down with it. And I talked about how the fourth quarter is going to be horrendous as you start to see massive layoffs, and you have this government shutdown that's an endless cycle that's not going to go away. It's just not going to go away. It's designed like this to fail because it's supposed to fail because it's a biblical thing and we can't do anything about it. All we can do is weather this minefield out and get to the last trumpet, which in my opinion is on September 10th of 2029, which is almost 4 years from now. So we'll see what happens. God bless. Get everything ready. I mean everything, because it is ready and the flood is coming on this world.